Everybody, my name is Ben Pacini, and I am an occasional commentator on LDX, which is apparently latter-day Twitter, for those of you who don't know. And there's been a weird tempest in a teapot, and I can't get it out of my head, so I'm going to record this, and I have a sprinkler head to fix. I've got kids to raise. I've got an early church meeting in the morning, so I'm going to bed in 15 minutes. And I'm going to get out a few things. I think Twitter, now X, is one of the worst forums for discussion because it's all sound bites. And I think videos can help. So I'm recording this so I can get a couple of thoughts out and hopefully make the conversation a little bit better. I'm going to try to cover as many things as I can as quickly as I can. Number one, this is not an open letter to Jacob Hansen and to Greg Matsen. Sorry about the noise. I've got some programs open in the background. But I will start with a couple of things, and that is that I don't think that the Lord wants us to be anti-woke. And I think this is hard medicine right now. I remember what it was like when Twitter was really early, and it was, progressives were running the place, and it was awful. And people were nasty, and they imputed ill intent to every interaction, right? They would catch you in a word, and they would say, aha, you're not willing to fly the right banner, so you are obviously the worst person ever. And those people are still around, I'm sure, but they're not on X. They're in other places. Maybe they went to Blue Sky. Maybe they are just quieter right now. They can read the room a little bit. I don't know. But here's what I can tell you. The same kinds of things that I saw from the left in those days are now happening to a lesser extent in different ways. I don't want to oversimplify this, but by people on the right, by people that I like, by people that I care about. And so to the extent that I'm going to start with anything, it's, hey, Jacob, Greg, I care about both of you. I like you. I think you have some good takes sometimes. I'm calling you out because I hope you consider me a friend. And also because I think you stepped in it on this one. Like, really, like this was bad and you screwed up and you got to own it. And I want to lead you through why I think that way. It's really hard because there's it's actually really funny. We have this thing where it's like niceness is not the same as kindness. And there are a lot of people who say this, right? And I'm one of the people who's also said that. But most of the people who say it are actually just like looking for an excuse to be really mean and be like, yeah, good job. I'm being kind, not nice. It turns out like just be a decent person is a really good rule of thumb. And there was like 5 years there where it went really south because we had some parasitic ideologies and they all caused all sorts of problems because nobody was willing to stand up and speak up and say some stuff. So I totally get it, right? I get why we're worried about wokeism, why we're worried about a lot of other stuff. But I need to be really clear. That there are now, like I am looking right now, I've got like 15 tabs open for reference, and I think there was some screw up here. There were LDS influencers who should have known better, who stoked the wrong fires. Like, and let me just boil this down to something really simple. I think a good, one way to look at how we handled this fair conference commentary is to ask ourselves the utilitarian question: if nobody had said anything, would the kingdom be stronger? I'm going to say this to Greg specifically. Greg, I think if you had not said anything, the kingdom would have been stronger. If Cougar Chronicle had kept their mouth shut, the kingdom would have been stronger. I think that now the thing people are talking about is not the phenomenal conference that was had. People are talking about Aaron Sherinian's personal views on sexuality issues. And that's just a really weird thing, right? That's the kind of thing that I don't want to have happen when I have an investigator coming to church. And now that's the conversation on Twitter. So as people are looking at what we are doing, we're going like, yeah, we have these really weird internecine wars about purity contests and all of that stuff. Instead of, we had an awesome conference about people who want to make the world better, who want to protect kids, who believe that like a structure for a male priesthood can benefit women. These are incredible insights. And instead, we are yelling about how Aaron Sherinian doesn't have quite the right set of beliefs. And I think that's just really sad. So in the first place, I listened to Cardin Ellis talking with Greg. He's super kind. And I loved Cardin. He's just kind of chill. And he was like, we should just be chill, people. Just be righteous and chill and love Jesus. And that is a great take. And I think the number one biggest problem with X is that everybody takes themselves so seriously all the time. It's like, just go out and touch grass, man. Like, you just gotta flip and relax a little bit. And this is not helping, right? Because it's like we perpetually decided to keep our knickers in a twist as like a hobby. And it's just the weirdest take. right? Like I wish I had time to be more online and to interact more on Twitter, except no, I don't. Like if I had more time, I would be doing other things, right? Like this is not the most important thing. And so I loved Cardin Ellis's point on that. But the one push that I will give is he was just super nice to Greg. And I think, as a friend, kindly, Greg propagated a piece of misinformation out of frustration. And I called him on it. I said, Greg, what are you doing, man? That's not the question that was asked. And he said, oh, there was a second question that was asked. I was there. 300 people were there. You were not there, which is true. I was not there. I said, oh, my bad. If I'm misinterpreting, please clarify. And so Greg goes and looks. He says, I've got the recording. Great. Show me the recording. I want to see it because if I'm getting partial information, I want to see what's going on. And then Greg comes back and says, well, I looked at it, but you got to understand the context. He shifts immediately, right? Moving the goalposts. Great. I don't have any issue that you have concerns about Aaron Sherinian. We can talk about that separately. I watched the video, and the video is Scott Gordon, who is the president of FAIR. He's a volunteer for a big organization that gets paid no money, right? And he is just hanging out there asking questions and kind of stumbles a little bit. By the way, Scott is just puts the saint in Latter-day Saint, like the best guy, right? Is a president of FAIR, loves the gospel, just a really good dude. And immediately was like, oh yeah, I botched the question. Sorry guys, I could have framed that a little bit better. Like what a good dose of humility to just be like, hey, that was on me. I could have asked the question a little bit better, a little bit more clear. And I would argue that there were two questions, which is one is, where do you stand on family proclamation? I think that's a question that could have been asked. The second question could have been, and how do you handle some of the real frustration that you're getting online? And that would be a better way to handle that. I also think that there's a question that I want to pose ethically of is it really our place to be asking the director of church comms what his sexuality stance is? I don't know. Let me put it differently. I actually think Aaron Sherinian did answer that question pretty well. And the way that he answered was, I've counseled with people that I admire and people that I sustain. That is code for senior leaders of the church. And I think that they are pretty well aware of where I stand on this. So to Jacob and Greg, I want to push this real hard because it's not you, but there are some people in your thread and you're not responsible for people who respond. I try to call out the bad guys when I can. I know you guys do too, but you got some people in your threads, they're straight up apostates who are saying the church is off the right path. The brethren are right. The brethren are wrong, but I've got it right. See, if they were really right, they would be way more serious. They would not hire Aaron Sherinian. That's called apostasy, right? When you say the brethren are out of line and I'm right and I've got it all figured out, and I'm not on board with that. I am not on that bus. And I would encourage both of you to set that really bright line of there is a point where this becomes a condemnation of senior brethren. This does become a point where we're speaking evil of the Lord's anointed. I don't have any problem. By the way, I don't have any problem with, hey, the senior brethren know that he had this past of advocating for pride and all of that stuff. Turns out, yes, they do. And once we know that they do, that conversation's over. Once I know that Elder Christofferson, President Oaks, President Nelson, whoever it is that is on board with him hiring, for me, I'm done, right? Because then at that point, it becomes a question of sustaining. Let me raise a couple of other things that I've seen. Number one, Megan Kohler took it on the nose. Megan is awesome. Megan is a friend. She's a writer for Deseret News. She had, I've not seen her presentation because I wasn't there, but the Deseret News had a write-up about it, and I think Megan's thinking is great. She gave a whole thing about how the priesthood is good for men, but it is actually equally good, if not more good for women, right? This structure that we have. I was like, what a phenomenal point. It was awesome. It's something that she and I have talked about in the past. I think Megan is awesome. And now the same people that are saying, so there's this guy who is saying that that Aaron Sherinian's a goblin, that the church is evil for supporting, just crazy stuff, right? Again, I'm not blaming Greg and Jacob for the weirdos in their threads. I do think we should call people out occasionally. I think that's actually a really good thing. I think, again, we can't just be nice, right? We have to be kind. There's some boldness that is required. When Megan Kohler is taking it on the nose and the same people are also saying the same things about Aaron Sherinian, that might be a bit of a wake-up call, right? Megan is somebody I will absolutely go to bat for. By the way, there's another person that's taking it on the nose, and that's Scott Gordon. And I'm going to go to bat for him too, because he's a good dude. And I don't want to overstate. He and I are friends, but I talk to him occasionally online, right? That's about as far as it goes. And not like we're besties or homies or anything. He has always just been a decent guy, and I think he is trying his best. And every one of the posts that he has made on Twitter have been thoughtful, deliberate. He's clarified. He's been honest. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say this was embarrassing. And I think there were people who knew better, who contributed. Greg, I'm not calling you out for things that you didn't do. I don't think that you're trying to get him fired. I don't think that you're saying mean things about Aaron Sherinian. I think you posted something that's not true, which is Aaron Sherinian was point blank asked to support the family proclamation and he wiggled out of it. That just didn't happen. Right? By the way, you can say, well, that was my perspective. Great. Now we're in a place where we can disagree amicably, right? We can have a conversation. Because here's the great thing. Now we can say there are different ways to perceive the way that question was asked. Okay? I want to talk about 2 or 3 other things. Number one, I think social media is really bad for us, but I think X is particularly bad for us. It's short form. I think Carson really hits this really hard, where it's like this is not good for us, right? We are always in the mode of the attacker, the accuser. Dan Ellsworth is a good friend of mine. I love what Dan had to say on this. He calls it the epistemology of hell. Is accusation. Epistemology, the theory of knowing. How do you know what is true? And I saw this in the early days on X. Like you accuse somebody of something and we just assumed it was true until they could prove otherwise. Nobody ever could, right? This is trial by Twitter. And there's no defense attorney good enough to survive that mob. And so now we've got good people whom I respect, like Greg and like Jacob, who are engaging in the same behavior, but because they're on the right wing, that's okay. And I'm just going to say no. I don't agree with that at all. And again, and by the way, I want to emphasize, because I hope that we're friends, right? And I think we are. I also think that this is not because Jacob, a friend of mine said, oh, they're just such bad actors, or makes you question the goodness of, their intent. No, it doesn't. This is not explained because Jacob and Greg or the Cuckoo Chronicle are filled with bad people. This is explained by basic human psychology. Sorry, I always go to psychology because I teach a psychology class. That's an ed psychology class, but we learn about this kind of stuff. Greg really thought that there were 2 questions. He was like, oh, now that I look at it, that doesn't work. So there must have been something else, because I definitely was feeling frustrated. And he had to go and look at it. Well, I've done that before. Most of us have, where we swear we heard A because that's what we were listening for, but we actually heard B. And I'm not upset about that. What I'm upset about is we got to call that out in ourselves when we see it and be like, oh, guys, I contributed to this. I'm sorry. I messed up. Not a big deal. Doubling down after that's been pointed out, that's where we get the confusion, because people are still going back to finding old posts by Greg where he said he didn't answer, he wiggled out of it, he played the weasel. Those are my terms. I don't think that Greg ever said played the weasel. I'm not trying to overstate things. This is not good for the kingdom. I don't think that we are better people, better disciples, because we have a pointing finger. And I'm not saying that I'm the only one. And actually, let me bring up one other point. So, and this may speak a little bit to Greg and Jacob's frustration. I work at BYU Idaho. By the way, everything that I say is my private opinion. You don't have to agree with any of it. Okay. And by the way, I don't speak for BYU Idaho. I don't speak for the church. I don't speak for anybody else. And if I say something stupid, then I should get in trouble for it. But I try not to say anything stupid, so hopefully I won't. At BYU Idaho right now, we want very, very badly to hire people who are on mission. Good news is most of our folks are, overwhelmingly. BYU Idaho is this gem, right? And we are all about a great education for low cost with real formation of discipleship. That's what we are about. But part of that discipleship is also peacemaking, and also it's just giving grace to people when they have views you disagree with. This is not very hard. So a friend of mine writes to me. He saw my post on Twitter and wrote in a private place. Just kind of said, so would you hire somebody at BYU Idaho if they had Aaron Sherinian's views? I'm going to respond to that. I want you to think about that, because I think that's a really good framing for the problem that we're having, because there's this feeling of we've got to have some level of purity. And so Greg actually said, he was like, well, I don't want it to be a litmus test. I actually think you do. I'm not saying that as an accusation. I think you do. You're kind of saying that this is a question that we should ask, that we should confront this, that we should have a conversation about it. I'm not sure that that's completely wrong. Let me try and give a different take. Let me start with, by the way, part of the reason why I feel like I got to stand up and say something on this is because I'm about as socially conservative on this stuff as you can find. Now, I'm not radically socially conservative, but moms and dads do better. Families are important. The most important thing, the most heroic act an American citizen can take is to raise good kids. I was in Baltimore. I was teaching, and outside a student's window, there were the riots going on. She texted me, and I was a math teacher at the time. She was like, "I'm real scared. What do I do?" And I remember my wife was in the room, and I was like, "Honey, what do we do? How do we make the world better?" And my wife, being brilliant, looked at me and said, we raise good kids. Because I was like, do I run for political office? Do I write more? Like, what do I do? And she was exactly right, right? Parents are the most important thing, and they are not getting the attention they deserve in American society. And this is something like, I will go down the line on every issue touching gender or sexuality or whatever it is. I have very conservative views. And that's part of why I feel like I need to speak up, because people can't accuse me. I have the scar tissue. Like, I've paid the price, and I've been the weirdo at a school that was pretty progressive, where everybody's looking at me like, oh, but will you be a safe place for our gay kids? Yeah, it turns out yes, because I teach math and I love kids. And it's just not that hard to teach really well. But like, I know this stuff. I've been through the ringer on this topic. So a friend of mine asked me, so would you hire somebody in these church schools? Because there's an effort to make sure that we're really on mission. And I want to emphasize, I guess, 3 things in order. Number 1, I want people who are on mission. I want people who love the Savior. I want people who love the prophet Joseph Smith, who stand for the doctrine, who believe in the stuff, who are morally courageous. I think this is important. On sexuality issues, absolutely. That is not the thing, but it is one thing. And I recognize that it speaks for a lot of other things. But there are 2 exceptions to this that I think are really, really, really relevant. Number 1, if an apostle has interviewed this person and said, I'm good with it, then I'm absolutely on board with figuring out whatever I need to figure out and trusting that the apostle has figured out what they need to figure out. And in this case, I don't think it's an apostle. I think it's several. And so the conversation about Aaron Sherinian, it is over. If there's a candidate that comes to us with the approval of multiple senior leaders of the church, I'm fully in. That just ends the conversation right there. And that makes it really, really easy. And there's a second exception. I think this one's a little bit trickier and probably the meatier of the 2. Here's the second exception. Let's say somebody comes to us and they have pride stuff all over in the past. And by the way, I wrote an article on pride flags. I can't get on board with waving a pride flag. It's not, I don't love gay kids or trans kids. Like, I want to support them. If they're coming to any classroom in the country, if there's an LDS kid who is gay or trans, I hope they're in my classroom. I hope I can support them. I can give them a great experience. I hope that to me is important. Having said that, I recognize there are a lot of Latter-day Saints who still wave pride flags. And I think a lot of them are, how do I say this? My default operating assumption is that they're my brothers and sisters in Christ, not that they're out there to manipulate or to cause problems or to undermine. And I think it's really dangerous. By the way, Greg and Jacob have done a good job of clarifying this. And so let me give this little shout out. I don't think that this is a litmus test for membership in the church. Membership in the church is the same thing that an 8-year-old has to believe in order to get baptized. Will you have faith in Christ, repent, try your best, right? Like that's about all we're getting at. Being a senior director of comms is a little bit different. Here's the difference, though. You don't sustain them. This isn't your jurisdiction. Here's perhaps the more important one. So I said that there's a second distinguisher, and here it is. If somebody is already here at BYU Idaho, my job is to support them, to love them, to welcome them in, to do everything I can to help them feel like they're a part of the community. And if there is something that they believe that I don't agree with, listen, that process already happened. And here's the thing. We haven't tightened up a whole ton because we've actually just got really good faculty, but we care about mission orientation and making sure that people are on mission. If somebody somehow got through that process, I'm not trying to push them out. I'm not trying to embarrass them. I'm not trying to catch them. Trying to love them, trying to welcome them. I hope they'll change their minds on stuff. I'll happily engage in the discussion because I think that stuff is fun. I like talking about this stuff. But what I won't do is try to find examples of or make an issue. I'll give you another example. Recently, there was an issue where a very good friend of mine, very Orthodox, somebody that I really appreciate, does great work for the church, the most on-board kind of person, critiqued BYU Idaho publicly. I wrote to him privately. I said, you better darn knock it off. This is not what good Latter-day Saints do. You want to talk to somebody? I'll give you the department chair's email address. You email them. You find a way to do this in the right way, and this is not the right way. Because this is what the left did 10 years ago that caused Twitter to be just a disaster, where it was public mob campaigns that caused frustration and anger and fury and that got people fired. And I'm just not on that train. And I don't think it's peacemaking to be on that train. Let me give some closing thoughts. I think Aaron Sherinian, I don't know him personally. he's a friend of a friend. He's a second order friend, and the friend likes him. That's about all I've got. We're friends on Facebook, I think. I see occasionally that he puts stuff out there. I don't have any problem if people are like, ooh, I would really, he's got some pride stuff up in the past. That raises my concerns a little bit. Great. It doesn't for me. I'm at the point where I say, if the brethren trust him, then I'm going to trust him too. But if you do, that's okay. I do think that we can draw where we say, and I'm not going to take to Twitter about it, because then and frustration. In the same way, Greg, love you dearly, man. Like, and I by the way, I should say, I asked Greg to call me. Like, I'm not trying to publish this to attack him, but I do think that when I get it wrong, which will happen in the future, Jacob, call me up. I have to say, hey, you're not understanding this one. This one, you're missing a little bit, and that's what I'm trying to do here. I really don't have any ill will towards either one of you. I think sometimes you have some good takes. That's code for sometimes you have some wrong takes, and that's when I like to debate and discuss. Right? I debated with Jacob about Trump, and it was a great time. This one's a little bit more serious because it has to do with the good name of the church, and it has to do with a guy who's trying his best. The reality is, like, I was listening to a biography today of Robert Gates. He was talking about the Iraq War, and one of the great mistakes they made was they purged all the Ba'ath Party members in Iraq, and it totally destroyed the country. Like, because everybody was part of the Ba'ath Party. It was a dictatorship. Like, you had to be part of the Ba'ath Party. And so to swear off Ba'ath Party members, there was like this ideological purge where we're going to keep ourselves separate from those people. And there weren't enough people to actually run the bureaucracies and the military and all of those things. And it makes sense, right? When you win, all of a sudden you want to do those things. You want to take control and power. And what I want to emphasize is that is a really dangerous path. And now that the left is on the outs, on X and in other places, now that the right is, kind of a little bit more, and by the way, I'm using left and right. That's not a perfect, I get it. If you're frustrated by that, I am too. Like, I wish I had better language, but it kind of communicates what we're both talking about. So go easy on that part, but I know that that's imprecise. I am very concerned that right now we are just in this pendulum swing, right? Where the left was terrible on X, back when it was Twitter, and it's better, but I can't really tell because I'm more on the right as a person, so I can't tell if it's actually better or if it's just better for me. Like, it's very hard for me to tell on that. I am worried, though, that we're starting to engage in the same things where it's like, I have concerns, and now all of a sudden people are getting emailed. Like, I remember when Hank Smith got in trouble, and I was like, this is wrong. This does not feel right. There is something about this that is immoral, and no one is standing up. No one is saying anything. Good members of the church are just like, well, I can't take a risk for this. And I think that's absolute hogwash. Well, I'm going to say the same thing of Aaron Sherinian, right? Actually, I'll go back to something that a friend of mine said. This was a few years ago. He was like, right now, everybody thinks that the apostasy is coming from the left. And there is a lot, right? And I recognize that. Well, today, I think and he said this like 5 years ago. This was right when it was like at its peak of the worst, right? He's like, give it time. It's going to come from the right. Folks, the politics isn't like, it's discipleship first. And by the way, I am very much on family proclamation grounds. I believe it is a core doctrine of our faith. But I'm not going to pretend that my interpretation is the most important, or that I understand everything, or like I'm very concerned that we have missed all of the lessons on peacemaking. I should say that too. A friend of mine, I am glad to see that the civility movement is slowly spreading. I think I've got one friend who is like, yeah, we got to do better. And he mentioned my name, which I was very touched by. I need to clarify, I'm not actually all that civil. Part of the reason why I have to talk so much about it is because it holds me accountable, because I'm not very civil. I like to yell. I like to argue. I like to get mad at people. So don't make me your paragon of civility. This is something that I think we need to do, and we need to do better. And accusation is just, anytime there's an accusation, I would just slow walk that. Now, I recognize harmless as doves, wise as serpents. There's a reason people are keeping their eyes open. As much as I love BYU Idaho and I think we do good work, I recognize that there have been struggles at church schools, and that we are trying to figure out who can we trust. Are we sure that people are in a good place? I think Aaron Sherinian answered that, by the way. For as much as there's been a lot of flack that he didn't answer it, I think he actually did. And what he said was not just that senior leaders have counseled with him, and have tried to say, hey, don't take it too personally. I liked his stillness comment. I thought it was fine. I think his presentation, from what I've heard, was fantastic. I am frustrated by how all of that went down, but I think I'm most frustrated because I think Aaron actually did answer it. He said, well, they support me, but also I feel absolutely confident in my ability to represent the First Presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Okay, that's enough for me. That's all I need. That's it. So this ended up being 10 minutes longer than 15. By the way, I should let me end on this thought. Greg and Jacob, I'm using you two because I know you have been on both of your podcasts. If there are people who are twisting what you have said, please tell me so I can call them out. And if I have misunderstood something, call me out, right? Be like, hey, I didn't say this. I said this. Great. That is the conversation that is useful. I welcome that. I wasn't, being persnickety when I was like, hey, show me the second video. I just didn't know that there was a second video. And then there wasn't, right? This is the kind of stuff we have to have conversations about. Love to everybody. I think Brother Ellis is right. Maybe we all just need to touch grass and chill out. I think my question is, what builds the kingdom? And I don't know that this has. And so I would encourage people to think through that. And with that, I'm gonna go to bed because I got kids to raise and I've got church meetings in the morning. So God bless, be well, do good work, and we'll see you later.